This is MyBlend Stories, and I'm Jeff Gerlach. Attending the MACUL conference is one of the biggest highlights of the year for Michigan educators. Over 4,500 attendees descended on Cobo Center in downtown Detroit to soak up the sessions put on by teachers throughout the state, as well as international thought leaders in the field of EdTech innovation. Jamie, Brandon, Roman, and I attended MACUL, representing MyBlend as presenters, session attendees, and connecting with people at our booth and all throughout the venue. We enjoyed connecting with a lot of Mich Ed friends, making new connections, and engaging in deep, thoughtful conversations on the whole. In the days following the conference, we've been trying to unpack and share our reflections, as so many others do. Personally, I was having a bit of writer's block. Brandon suggested doing a podcast, so I ran with that idea. I booked a meeting room here at MVU, and I put a mic in the middle of the table. I didn't have guiding questions, but I think the four of us did a pretty good job improvising. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of merit to planning and preparation. We do a lot of that, and we're deeply thoughtful people when we do. But sometimes you just need to jump in and trust that you'll do well. Listening to the recording now, I like the rawness. And I'm glad that we captured these thoughts for us to do something with them in the future. Ironically, that seems to be the real power in reflections. To look forward as you think back. As a group, we've been reading the steady stream of reflections that have come in the aftermath of this year's conference. We send links back and forth in the chats that we have ongoing. Collectively, we feel that they help to enrich our conference perspective. In retrospect, we found many of them to deepen our thinking about the sessions that we attended, fill us in on the ones that we missed, and identify themes from the conversation buzz that flowed through the halls. So in addition to our conversation here, we want to share some other people's really great reflections. So check out the blog post that goes with this podcast reflection for links to those great reads. Thanks again to Jamie, Brandon, and Roman for their thoughts and for spending 3 really dense days together with me. It was really fun, and we are all completely exhausted. This is our story.
So this podcasting idea, I'm just going to openly say this, so don't take offense or anyway, but I think there is some disconnect and some disagreement amongst all of us about what is beneficial coming out of it and what are some challenges that are seen at MACUL and what are some areas of improvement or whatever. I think that would be an interesting way to open up the floor amongst us as a team. So think about our backgrounds even still.
Yeah.
You know, if that was a podcast about our discussions about MACUL, you know, even hearing, you know, your reflection, thinking about my reflection, thinking about everything. If we recorded that, like that authentic conversation, because yet us four have not debriefed, I wonder if that would be a space for a podcast.
You want to just roll into it?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the idea.
So that was my thought.
It's a great thought.
Okay. What if we started with sharing one thing, one takeaway from...
Start out with that.
And start with that and then feel our way through it.
Right.
Just so you know, though, I won't be writing a text reflection if I'm going to edit this by tomorrow.
That's fine. I wrote a text reflection.
And I think his is plenty long anyway.
I don't think we're going to be using
your reflection is enormous.
Have you read it?
No,
but it's good.
Great.
So let's do
great.
this. Start off just telling us about
Myself.
your first MACUL, because you're the only one of the group here that this was your first MACUL.
Right.
And most of the time, I don't think I considered that at all throughout the entire conference.
Just me, you didn't consider me.
Well, because you've been a member of this team since we started.
Right.
And I guess it slipped my mind that you weren't there last year.
Was it jury duty?
Yeah, I had potential jury duty. So Brandon got to go and had a wonderful time in Grand Rapids. So, okay. This was my first MACUL. And as I said, to start out with, my feet hurt. That's really is what it is. There was a lot going on. I'm mostly at conferences either as a somebody running a booth or whatever, or they're IT-based conferences, and, most of it's kind of like workshops and on how to do certain things and whatever. So this was really interesting, and I was kind of lost at the sheer number of sessions that they had going on at the same time, and there was just a lot of different things that I was kind of drawn to, that all happened to be at the same time, which was kind of really hard to decide on one. My biggest problem was actually keeping track of time in each session. Even though you look at a paper, it says, oh, it's 1 hour long. You're like, oh, 1 hour, that seems like plenty of time. You get into them, and they're really all engaging, and the attendees are, all engaged in the conversations and everything, and the time just really flies by. I'm pretty sure there was a couple presenters who just didn't get to, cover everything that they wanted to cover, but there was a lot of good information from it. I really enjoyed actually the vendor area. I wasn't sure on who attends these kind of things from a vendor perspective. Obviously, there was the people doing the smart boards and things like that, but I was really surprised to see how many actual computer companies there were. There was Acer and Asus and everything, and anybody who really makes a Chromebook nowadays. And really interested in seeing the technologies that were used by the attendees as well. You would think that it would be a lot of iPads and tablets, but no, I saw a really big population of people having Chromebooks of every kind, and actually made me want to get a Chromebook, because I'm over there on my iPad sitting, without a table or anything like that, and trying to get that and my keyboard and type on that, and where somebody in front of me just pulled out a Chromebook, opened it up on, and they were doing their stuff. And they also had about 25 different sessions to go to that they could talk about Chromebooks. So
when I think that was a change. Last year it was iPad.
Well, and I think that's something that I also reflected on. I thought, man, everybody was always talking about iPads and apps and these accessories and everything that goes onto an iPad, but now you turn around and you say, man, there's not even that many MacBooks going on. I'm sure that maybe they have it as their primary computer or whatever if they do any kind of editing or something, but everybody had a Chromebook. Literally, if you went to the Chromebook session, obviously everybody had a Chromebook in there. But a good session that I attended was add-ons for Google, Docs or spreadsheets and everything, and man, everybody had a Chromebook in there, and they were all just following along with how do I get this and where do I go to download that, and you just couldn't do that on an iPad, I don't think, because I would have to go download the app for Sheets and get the app for Word and for Docs and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it was really good, without getting much more into it. I think it's a great experience. I think the attendees is what makes this conference, because it's a great place for networking, and you get to meet a lot of people that you've talked to in passing, or you saw on the website, or you thought, oh, these people are doing something cool in their district, and you actually get to do a chance to connect with them. So that was my first MACUL.
What's interesting is that Roman, being an educational technology specialist, still had the mind overflow that a typical first-time MACUL participant experiences. That's interesting to me. Who's next, Jamie or Brandon?
Yes.
Talk at the same time and see who wins.
I could keep going. So
I know you could. Let's have overtime with Roman at the end of this.
Jamie, was this your first time doing pre-con stuff?
Mm-hmm. Well, my district would never pay for a pre-con.
Okay.
That's expensive. And then, it's an extra night and all that stuff. I used to do pre-con with MVS, but that, it used to be led almost like a staff meeting.
I think, though, the pre-con is where I got the most. I think it was probably the best session, even though I was in our session. I think you can see the people getting a lot more out of it. Obviously, it was because of the time, I think. How much was it? It wasn't too bad per person.
Well, it's not too bad, but I think there also is different levels of interactions. So I would go to a MACUL session with the hopes of gaining like a little nugget of information, a little bit of inspiration to go and take back and use in my own context.
Right.
Pre-con, you expect a lot more than a little nugget of information. You expect a hands-on interaction, and I think that's how Jeff and I kind of tried to design that session.
Yeah, I wish we actually got to make the no-bake cookies, though.
Yeah, unfortunately,
peanut allergies or something. Yeah.
No actual cookies. No.
I thought it was funny because Google Plus does that auto-awesome
the stories
thing. Yeah, that's what it was. And I was reminded of these no-bake cookies again that we went through and pretended to make.
Yeah.
So we were pretending to make fake cookies, and
Right.
I thought that was interesting.
Like a double pretend.
Yeah. So like, does it make it real because there's like a double negative?
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting though. At the same time, that you mentioned that there was a couple people who were tweeting out, "Oh, making no bake cookies at blended learning session or whatever," and the quality of the tweets that you got from a pre-con session like ours was, I think, a lot better than the regular sessions, because regular sessions was a lot of, "Oh, just learn about blah 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 tool," and they give it a link or a quote that was on the slide or something. So you really had a lot of time, and people put into these tweets, they're like, "Oh, I'm actually doing something," or "Here's a picture of us doing something."
So we had 3.5 hours. Is that how long we had?
Yeah, but I think from the tweet perspective, so I was so busy at the conference and not going to sessions. This is the first time ever I never went to a session, which is really strange for me. How many years in the classroom,
Me
how many
too.
years as a teacher face-to-face and online. This was a really beneficial session conference. So I depended a lot on people just dumping on Twitter. So then I could go back through the feed and see the quotes, see the stuff that they put out. Whether it be the whole presentation or just simply a tool. I mean, that was really beneficial to me.
Yeah.
And I could kind of get a pulse on maybe the flavor of MACUL, even though I wasn't able with my schedule to attend a session. My perspective as a whole, just like the 20,000 foot view of MACUL, was just sort of being able to step back, and instead of getting this information dump feeling or this overwhelming feeling of all the different sessions in MACUL, was seeing how 90% of the sessions are teachers sharing what they're doing and really putting themselves out there. And for a teacher, and Jeff, you might have this perspective too, like that takes a lot of guts and a lot of ability to put yourself out there in front of your colleagues, people that may know more about something than you do. So I could imagine if I was a teacher sharing something about my website and have Roman be in the room, someone who could know 20 times more than what I know sitting in the room. But there is like
10, 20, 10.
No judgment zone. Everybody being so welcome for any type of sharing that happens in that environment. And I think that's not common.
Teachers have a difficult time with that vulnerability, right? Like, think of the culture that you come from that you have to overcome. A silo culture.
Well,
most of these teachers are probably like, they're either working in isolation and doing these great things and know that
in their four walls.
Yeah, in the four walls of their classroom. That's just, it's awesome, and that's it. Like they know that they need to share this with people, or administrators recognize that they're doing great things, but that's like the and that's probably a likely scenario. It's like, you're doing awesome stuff, you've got to go present. Like, I remember getting told by my administrator that, I can't believe you're doing all this stuff and you're not going to conferences. You don't attend conferences.
Well, there's the humble nature of doing your work. Like, I'm just doing
it's a humble profession
job. And so to be able to step out of your classroom, to take the time to do these presentations. And like Roman said, teachers are running out of time because they're so thoughtful, and they're being so thoughtful about how to deliver the content and how to engage their audience and how to really pull all this stuff together, that we're running out of time in this hour just to share what I'm doing. But then a result comes out of that is there's such value in other people's ideas and sharing those ideas, that like the air in all of MACUL is all about communication and excitement. I mean, and maybe in Cobo it was just that space, because you had kind of that maker area over here, and then the student showcase, this place, and then all these spaces for collaboration now, especially with the renovation, that it really led itself well to just on the fly communication and on the fly talks with individuals. And maybe it was just our presence in the booth, but I felt like everybody's brain was working. Everyone's teacher brain was working and thinking about things and thinking about how to change their practice or to implement something new, whether it be a tool or not. I could just see people's brains working the whole time they were there.
I do think, though, with the time constraint, though, a lot of what I saw was kind of frustration of, oh my God, I can't believe that this one person's asking this question that's taking 5 minutes to answer that the presenter could be using for, explaining something else to me. So there was a couple sessions, and this is not uncommon for conferences that, you'll have people just get up and leave and go to something else. And so there was a couple that I saw people really getting excited about, we're going to start the session. They get their laptop out and they're about to take notes and they make sure they're online, and then they start talking. The presenter starts talking and the person just closes their laptop, and then eventually it just goes to laptop in the bag, and then it goes to there's 500 other sessions that either I have to check out or I'm going to check out because I don't think I'm getting the right kind of stuff here. So I did see a little bit of maybe people not necessarily understanding the session that they kind of chose to be in, or kind of going, man, there's so much more. Can I got a quarter of this session. Can I get a quarter of the next session? Can I get a half of the third session to get it in and get like this ball of idea from everything? Kind of, and at least that's kind of what I thought.
Dave and I session kind of connects to what you were talking about, because there was so you guys know, but not everyone knows, that we did this session on active learning strategies meets Google Classroom.
Okay.
And as the conference got closer, Dave Goodrich and I, both coming from an instructional design mindset, started thinking, oh man, it's going to be more about active learning strategies and it's going to be less about classroom. And it was really, I can't speak for Dave, but it was really concerning to me for it not to be a bait and switch. Mm-hmm. They had to come in there and their expectations needed to be met. Mm-hmm. And I went down the aisleway 5 minutes before it started, and then right before it was going to start, and said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to the session. The title says Active Learning Strategies Meet Google Classroom. Just want to give everyone a heads up that the lion's share of our focus is going to be on active learning strategies, and that we're going to basically see how well Google Classroom does at meeting those needs. And, we'll explore the affordances, but we'll also talk about, the conduit points where you're going to have to bring in a new tool when that tool meets its limitation. And it was one of these things where we were feeling out the whole way. We were, like you said, really concerned about being really thoughtful about meeting people's needs. And we said, if you're looking for something on Classroom, there's other sessions that are going on right now, because there actually were right next door, that are much more of a tool tutorial. And a couple of people got up and left, and I was happy about that. Mm-hmm. We got into it, and people were really enjoying this perspective of looking at it from a design point of view. And we got to this corners activity where each corner was exploring the limitations of Classroom, bringing out active learning strategies in general. I got to give credit to Dave, because he did a lot of great work with that corners activity to facilitate conversation, right? And a theme that I saw is everyone's mind was about finding a line of limitation where Classroom started failing. And they actually started getting excited about finding that line versus just talking about how great Classroom was. Mm-hmm. And this was shared with me, that finding that line helps to really shine a light on what is really great about a certain tech tool and where the connecting points are to others. When you focus on teaching and learning first, it really empowers you to kind of be a maestro, right. The conductor of the orchestra, so to speak, right? During that corners activity, a lot of people got up and left because they were a lot of people didn't want to do the activity where they're walking around the room, right? And I thought, that's cool. If you got what you needed from this, or it wasn't for you, I'm glad that you used a natural segue to go to another session. Mm-hmm. So, because it was roughly a half an hour left. So cool, you get a half an hour at another session. Right. That's cool. But the people that stayed, there was probably judging on the pictures, how many people do you think were in there, Jamie? 40?
Mm-hmm. We had 2 aisles, so.
And we ended up with 20 left in it, right? But I ended up having this conversation with this guy about, they had just got done training all their teachers on my big campus. I'm
not sure.
Oh. But an LMS, right? And they just shut it down. They're not supporting it anymore. Okay. And so this guy was very much in panic mode. We need to find a solution for a district full of teachers. And we started having a lot of these side conversations, and all of it was like, again, exploring the limitations of things. And I gotta admit, I went in with a really pessimistic viewpoint. Maybe not pessimistic, but I had some doubts on whether it was going to work, because I didn't want to be disingenuous. I did want to be thoughtful. In a session kind of thing, you kind of feel like you need to be the imparter of wisdom in a lot of senses. But what that uncertainty allowed us to do is very much be a community of learners. The participants got to use that space for what they wanted to use it for. That was one of the highlights of my entire conference experience, was seeing the ownership being shared between everybody. It was just a really cool experience.
Well, and it brings up value, right? And that need for authentic value. And I think that's what I really enjoyed about our pre-conference session, is because just talking about the value of tools and strategies, and then talking about the value of, blended design in your classroom. And that is just such meaningful conversation. And then something I struggled with the leadership talk that I gave, because it was so centered in policy and so anchored in standards and the MACUL competencies and all this stuff. So how do you bring value into like a legitimate 20-slide information blob?
Right.
And then to even make matters worse, but good, but worse, in a room of 36, first 36, I had 83 people in there. And so how do you facilitate conversation? How do you make something meaningful when you can't even take a stock of who's in the room? And then exactly, like, I'm not like the divine knowledge holder of all this information. So my thought was, here, put this out there, see what people think from their perspective. And I would just hope that I was able to provide people with enough space to then bring something back to their school, bring something back to their district, or to have one's takeaway, and I think that's what more than anything else, is that make sure that there's value coming out of the session.
So kind of continuing on actually being a part of the session, Brandon, you got a chance to be in a pre-con session that was fairly long and extensive, and what kind of insights do you have about being a part of the crowd?
Well, I went to this all-day session. It was from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. And it was basically to get an idea of what the mindset is of the teacher who is in a Chromebook classroom, maybe a one-to-one Chromebook classroom, and really using that to drive the student interaction. And I feel like a lot of it was introduction to the Chromebook. And although I've never, when I went to the session, that was maybe the second time I've ever opened a Chromebook and, used one. It was all review for me. It was, we started off...
It was Google Apps, pretty much. Right?
It was, it was Chrome. It was really, because the interface on a Chromebook is the Chrome browser, right? So it was really review for me. And there was a couple maybe hotkey tricks that I picked up and learned. Actually, the most beneficial aspect of it for me was actually going into Google Classroom, getting a user ID, seeing what it's like as a teacher, and then also what it's like as a student. So creating an assignment, and then logging out, and then logging in as a student, and taking the assignment, and seeing how the feedback is reported to the teacher, to the instructor, and see how it operated, which I hadn't done before. I had seen, this is how you customize the background, this is how you, set up your space, but not the actual ins and outs of creating an assignment, and really, knowing what the capabilities are and what are the limitations, because it's truly not an LMS, and I think that might be a misconception.
Right. But
for what it does it really well, which is organize the classroom use of Google Drive. If that's what you're using to drive the classroom, the technology aspect of it, then it's really good, because it creates its own folder and centralizes all of the documents that are shared throughout the class and students.
So it kind of sounds that what your session was missing is what Jeff was really talking about, is instead of, I think you really went into it trying to get the idea of, why Chromebook, why Chrome OS, benefits of it, but not in the sense of, here's how you turn it on, and, going over the tool that some of the sessions do. So I think that's kind of what Jeff touched on.
Yeah, while we're just here, one of the things that was brought up in our session was like any of these active learning strategies, like a background knowledge probe, or really anything that you wanted to do synchronously. When we tried to ram it through Google Classroom, it wasn't working. It was obvious, like Classroom specifically, but maybe LMSs in themselves as a standalone tool aren't going to be great for these synchronous interactions. You have to either bring something in that's going to be served up from the LMS, or you got to choose something completely different. Another thing that everyone was talking about is like, if Google's going to do something next on Classroom, it will be to explore small group collaborative projects. It's like right now, you can make an announcement and basically have everyone working in the same doc. You can assign it and make a copy so that each individual student gets that copy of that doc and they can work on it and turn it in individually. But as of right now, and maybe you saw it differently, or maybe you could confirm it, as of right now, you can't say, okay, Roman and Brandon are going to work as a group in this doc. Jamie and Jeff are going to work on the same assignment. And they're going to get their own doc for that. Like, there wasn't a lot of like collaborative workflow.
Yeah, it was for the people. I think most of the people that were there really needed that overview of the ins and outs of the Chromebook as a device, and then the different capabilities within it. That was useful for them.
Yeah,
It was just, for me, that wasn't my goal. And for the people that were there, it did serve that purpose. And I think that was the main intent of the session. And my purpose for going there was like just to try to understand the mindset of someone who is going to be in that space.
Now that you mention it, a lot of the people that were in Dave and I's session were people that were familiar with Classroom, that had been using it since the start of the school year. We went in there thinking that there was gonna be a lot of people that were drinking the Kool-Aid, but it wasn't that way at all. It wasn't people bashing it either. It was like people just being really thoughtful about the critique of that. And maybe the session spoke to that. When you say active learning strategies meets Google Classroom, maybe there were people that knew more than us when we wrote that description, that thought it was going to be a thoughtful content pedagogical technology, a TPAC kind of critique of Google Classroom and active learning strategies as they relate to active learning strategies. But yeah, I mean, they sound like what Roman said, what certain people needed. Maybe they're complementary sessions, right? With people that are in slightly different places with that particular tool.
Yeah, well, I think that there's probably two types of sessions. One which is introductory, this is what it is, and then there's one which is probably what people were coming to your session looking for was, okay, we have it, it is what it is, how can we use it? And what are some strategies, what are some tips and some tricks for using this in a meaningful way?
Well, I also think step back a little bit, not just Classroom, but digital learning as a whole. We're either going to experience or have to improve or learn on one of two aspects. One is the content, the digital tool. What are you doing? But then the other part is the teaching. So that's what kind of happens with MACUL, is you either end up falling into going to one sessions or the other. Like if you're not too sure what that space is looking like. There was an individual that I talked to before my session, and he said, I'm so glad you're a math teacher, because I really need somebody to bring this home to the math classroom for me. And I told him, I said, hey man, I'm not going to be able to do that for you, because some of that is your own classroom and your own space. And you're going to have to be able to say, okay, these are the things I've learned. Now I'm going to have to self-reflect and apply this to my own classroom. And that's almost the same way I felt my very first MACUL was, little math sessions. Like, none of this is related to my classroom, but no one can do that for me. They're just either trying to share their teaching experiences, right? Like your active learning strategies. And then as a math teacher in your session, it's up to me to then take that and relate it to my own practice. Or I'm in a Chromebook session. They're not going to be able to know me. It's not Chromebooks for Jamie. It's Chromebooks. Hey, this is some stuff. It may be useful, it may be not. But what is the one thing you can take out of here and learn from it? So it's a little bit of, lack of a better phrase, reducing your expectations of the presenter and flipping that and putting that expectation on yourself and putting it on yourself to come out of there with a meaningful experience.
Right. But I do think, though, that MACUL itself could do a better job in identifying some aspects of sessions that might be useful for attendees to know about. I know that sessions already have descriptions, but they're all like high level, like, this is going to be awesome. It's pretty much a way of saying that in teach speak, or whatever you want to do about your session. And I know that they had tracks, but I think it would be nice if some sessions, like there was one session that I went on, add-ons for Google and stuff, and in the very beginning she said that this is not a session for beginners. Like, we're going to go through actually using some of these and deep dive into some of them, and I was like, cool, because that's what I would want. But then 3 people, got up and left. I don't necessarily know what they were expecting, but I also reflected on it the same way that you're talking about, Jamie. I had an idea of what add-ons for Google was and all this kind of stuff. So just her telling me, hey, these add-ons exist, if that was my thought pattern of the session, I would have been like, well, this kind of sucked, Yeah, there's add-ons. But it was more for, look at these education-based add-ons, like add-ons that are being used in education and how they're being used in the classroom. So beyond going and saying, yeah, add-ons exist, my whole thing of taking away from it is you could implement so many of them in education and make things better. Some of them, like Doctopus was pretty much classroom before there was classroom. That's what everybody was using it. And it's kind of hella crazy to use if you don't really know what it is, because she went through it. But I got a lot out of it. And if there was some sort of maybe indicator on, hey, this is a more of a welcome to Chromebooks as opposed to Chromebooks, the why and hows, I think that would kind of help out a lot of people, especially first-time attendees, because it takes a while to get into a frame of mind where you're like, I need to align this session to myself. And I think that's great. And that's how you should do it, because like you said, nobody's going to do that for you. But when you just kind of go in there first time, you're going by the title and the description. You're like, all right, cool, let's learn about active learning in Google Classroom. What do you mean you're not talking about Google Classroom? That kind of stuff. So yeah. I do think that there's room for improvement at the conference level overall.
Well, and it's so hard because, think about the vast variety of people there. Not only were there 5,000 educators that registered for the conference, but you're talking K through higher ed. You're talking leaders, teachers, special ed, tech directors. Like, there is a massive amount of people that go to this conference. So it's difficult to start to categorize, and I can understand from a crowdsourcing perspective, this is not something that MACUL has a call out for specific areas, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they do their best to sponsor certain speakers, and I think that's what they try to do when it comes to, like, this is needed, this is needed, this is needed.
Mm. But then it's kind of like a free-for-all. And that's why you end up with 55 sessions at the 8:30 to 10:30 time slot or something. So,
no, I've been thinking about what Jamie said, and I think it's a really interesting observation. Like, it's not all the speaker's responsibility, and applying it to what Roman was saying, like, I don't even think it's MACUL's responsibility. So, MACUL speakers and MACUL do so much organization of the sessions, right? Like, speakers put a lot of thought into what they're going to say. And a lot of times the whole perspective is I'm just going to share out what I'm doing in my class because it becomes impossible to predict what everyone else is going to find useful. And at a higher level, MACUL is kind of like they get these proposals, they get a ton of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just, a lot of times it's descriptions of what people are going to do. Dave and I's presentation is a perfect example of that. Dave slapped together a presentation roughly about what we were going to do. Then after it got accepted, we were like, okay, what's this really going to be about, right? Not that we were like trying to pull a bait and switch, but it was kind of like, oh, we're revisiting our thoughts on this now. And basically, like, I could see a lot of people typing up something saying, okay, that cool thing I'm really doing, let's try to just describe it here. On a whim, I'm not going to get that accepted. Oh, darn, my session got accepted. Now I got to actually go there and do it.
I want to know the amount of people that have their presentation done when they submit the proposal.
Yeah, and...
Because on Twitter, 2 nights before, it was all, working on my presentation.
Yeah.
About to take off.
So, but the thing that we don't talk about a lot is there's a lot of preparation for... was it Brad Wilson's blog that went out that was like...
Oh, the how to not choose your sessions or how to not
choose your
present.
sessions.
No, it was like how to not present in MACUL or something like that, or the 10 tips for presenting in MACUL was backwards. He did some witty little.
Brad did a lot to get people prepared for MACUL, right? But I think and this isn't. I want to make it clear that I'm not referencing any content of his, but it's like those how-to guides of how to be a conference attendee are a lot about like not losing your sanity. Don't be afraid to take a session off and talk to the presenter from the previous session that you went to if it's really engaging. It's all about your own personal journey. Right. And I think really a lot is said in that. If we take off like the recommendation of skipping sessions and stuff and just talk about it being your own personal journey, you've got to understand what you want to get out of it to begin with, and then you got to be willing to revise that continuously as you go on, because it's going to change. And if you're a person who like their expectations aren't met and that results in you feeling like it's a failure, you have to somehow be you have to get yourself to a place where it's okay, where it's like you understand that your goal is a moving target. And I think that's really tough for a lot of type A personality teachers, which there are a heck of a lot of, and Jamie's raising her hand right now. It's not a science, it's more of an art, this conference attending thing. I was dreading, to a certain extent, going to this conference this year. And a big reason is I've been to 4. The first 2 I was as a teacher, and my goal was very, very clear. Like, I can go here, I can connect with educators that are of a ilk that I don't run into on a daily basis. I can pick their brains, I can attend their sessions, and I can just soak up as much as I can and try to let it inform me when I go back to class on Monday. Last year, first conference on board with MyBlend and MVU, and my goal was very clear. Connect with teachers, learn what best practices in blended learning in the field, try to make connections for social outreach. Long before we were doing podcasts, long before we were doing videos, everything. If we think of March last year, I was just focused on meeting people and learning from them. So it wasn't too far removed from that. This year, I was like, man, I don't get to do any of the fun stuff. I'm putting together. I'm just existing in this space of like disseminating my information. And halfway through that pre-con, when we started having really good conversations with the people in that session about what they thought about designing in a holistic way or tool choice and really rich conversations with educators, I remembered that, it was a two-way street. And actually being in those positions where last year there wasn't a lot of blended learning conversation. I had to read between the lines to figure out if a session was going to be about like a blended space, right? Whether it was going to be technology use centric or whether it was going to be about blended. This year there was concurrent sessions that I session surfed. I'm sorry, Roman, but I could go to one session. I went to 3 sessions during that hour span. And during that time, it wasn't like like I thought people's sessions were bad. It's just I needed to soak it all up. And there's a lot of people thinking thoughtfully about this stuff that we didn't consider, or stuff that's like so much in our way of thinking that it's crazy that we haven't met them before. Mm-hmm. And that's the opportunity that we have there. Can we meet these people in social media too? Yeah. But when we get them all in the same place, the people that come out of the woodwork are the people that don't have a huge Twitter presence. Right. That don't always think about sharing in the open what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And this session that they're doing has been like, this isn't just a session they're doing. This has been a labor of love for a school year. And we get a great window into what they're doing.
A 50-minute window.
A 50-minute window. And then my whole focus isn't on the session itself anymore. It's about, oh, wow, I wonder what else they're doing here. Like the last session I attended, I was like, hey, I love what you're doing. I think it's amazing. And the way that you approach your use of Blackboard to accommodate teaching and learning in your specific situation, I think is amazing. I want to do a podcast with you. And so I'm doing that interview tomorrow night. And to me, that's what it is. It's like, I just want to see what you're doing, be amazed by it, and then maybe I can help you take your understanding deeper, and in the process highlight what you're doing so that we can extend that voice a little bit more.
Well, and I think that voice issue, if you're trying to extend your voice, I mean, I love Twitter, don't get me wrong, but we've all discussed on many occasions it's not really the environment for deep collaboration and deep sharing. Maybe a PD in your district is that opportunity, maybe, but your reach extends to maybe the 6 people that teach your content, or, at best, right? So if we're talking about the ways to extend our reach as teachers, to extend how we can impact multiple groups of students across the state, or maybe even beyond, depending on who's in the session, that this is that opportunity. And it's maybe a chance for us to redefine what we mean by professional development, even if it's personal professional development. Where do you really need to achieve A, B, and C to call it professional development? Do you really need to have an output to call it professional development? Or is it just a chance to sit down, take a break, to think, to read, to listen, and to reflect on your own practice? And in teaching, we're so trained to be output-based that becomes becomes a challenge if you're not used to that. So if I was to go back to my principal, he said, what'd you do? What you got? What you going to do? Where's your tool? Where's the thing? Or is it a leader that just says, all right, let's share. What did you take away? What is your reflection? Yeah. Something like this, and it's not our fault as teachers or our fault as leaders or anything. It's just a very high stress, high output environment, and we're not used to sitting back and let somebody else do the talking and reflect and learn.
That's very true.
And MACUL's a good place for that, if you just let it be that place.
Yeah.
I almost feel like there needs to be a space after MACUL for everybody just to kind of continue collaborating beyond Twitter. To maybe even for those people who are not on Twitter all the time, just kind of have something like ideas gathered or tools you're really excited about or something you can put together more than 140 characters. And I know that there's a lot of people who are going to be active on that, who have their own blogs and who'll do a post on it and, they'll tweet it out. But I think that there's a lot of people who don't have that kind of presence, but I don't know, maybe even something as simple as a Facebook group or whatever.
Well, and there's the Best of MACUL circuit.
Which is, see, this is my first MACUL. Where was it? Is this in my booklet? Did I get this in a packet?
No, it's sort of like, with lack of better words, like a tour of a certain number of the presentations. And they go to, different regions in Michigan and put on like it's either half or a full day conference. I'm unsure. But what you're describing almost feels ed campy a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think even not physically having a conference or something. Just, man, think of it even as a, hey, everybody, here's the MACUL 15 after party Google Doc. Go nuts. Put in your idea that you get, the context that you made, and maybe you can follow up with somebody. I don't know, missed connections or something. Hey, you in the red scarf, we talked about blended. didn't get your phone number. I know Brennan's laughing. I didn't mean that kind of connection, but just something if you want to connect with people again afterwards, you might have had a great conversation in a group of people in the hallway, but you didn't get everybody's information to continue on with this.
So what are you feeling like for your own growth or for your own development? What is the number one missing thing right now? Is it really trying to connect with 5,000 other people?
No, I think it's following up with people who had the same interests as I did. So maybe, so there was the MACUL app, right, that a lot of people had. They had my sessions and everything on it. And this might exist on it. I didn't click on any of the other icons, but maybe like a discussion topic or forum for each session to kind of continue that on. Because, like I said, my biggest critique was, man, I had no time to do anything in any of these sessions. 1 hour, presenter talks, bam, 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 2 questions, and we're out. But somebody might have had a question that I was like, okay, yeah, I might have the same question, but they pulled a Jeff and they were out in half an hour and into a different session, So
I apologize to anyone that was potentially offended by that. I even mentioned in my session people pulled out, and I assume that you got to use your time the way you got to use your time.
Yeah,
right?
and I
like you said, it's valuable.
Right. I happen to be the kind of person where I'm like, I came here. Most of the time, I'm in the first 3 rows. If I get up and walk away, I mean, that's going to be crushing for the person. Like, that's just how much I have of an influence. That's what I feel like, right? But no, if there was at least some sort of follow-up or I know, there's a lot of contact information for the presenters, so maybe if I have a question, I can contact them. But I would want to get into that discussion. And maybe that's what was missing is the fact that nobody really had time to have a good discussion after their session. Because, we had like an hour in between some of the sessions, but a lot of time you were running to the next session. And I think that not everybody took the advice that Brad had and what you said, Jeff, about taking a break from sessions to maybe go and network and go and talk to these people. So I think that's kind of what's missing for me is that kind of follow-up discussions that, hey, maybe I'll just troll those too and I won't say a single thing in it, but I want to see what everybody else is talking about.
I wonder if this conference is unique in that, like, I feel the same way, but I also know the reality that I've never been at a conference that provides that continuous back channel. So is it just different because it's MACUL? Is it just different because it's people sharing their practice and I want to be connected with that person? Like, what makes this different? Like, from iNACOL. If I go to the iNACOL conference, like, oh, that was cool, but all right, let's keep going because they're from DC or something. But maybe I know that this person's from Kalamazoo. And maybe you're so close and you're doing this really awesome thing.
Right.
I just want to keep, it's like a fan club.
And that's probably the biggest thing for it is that it's local. No matter where in Michigan you are, this is the Michigan conference, So
there's a lot of energy behind the ideas at iNACOL. People get really psyched about this year I got really, really psyched.
iNACOL or MACUL?
iNACOL.
Okay.
I got really, really excited about competency-based learning. I had known about it before, but talking with people and seeing it as not like this prepackaged thing that I had to completely prescribe to, but breaking down the mastery component of it and imagining how you could implement it at a local level and, just all the messiness of it. There was a lot of conversation where I would jump from session to session and the conversation would just pick up. Didn't matter what face I was talking to, right? It could be any face. We just sit down and we start talking about it because it was just this common language. And MACUL, it's less about, the ideas are important, but because the ideas, everyone's got their own little idea. Every session is based upon experiential stuff. This is what I'm experiencing and I want to share it with you. And we have these conversations where everyone's bringing really specific information to the table, specific takeaways. And are there commonalities? Sure. But the emphasis isn't on the commonalities. The emphasis is on the people and their unique experience and the things that they're going through and their quest to find solutions for them. Whereas iNACOL, it was let's be honest, it's much more rooted in cognitive psychology. It's rooted in research papers. It's rooted in policy. And so that's why there's a common language there, because that common language has been established. Teachers at MACUL are writing their own novels, basically. Everything is a unique experience. And I can identify with that. I was a classroom teacher who was just going through stuff and felt everything was just related to my specific situation. And when I got together with other people who were also thinking in that way, it was really, really good to connect because we could empathize with each other's struggles. We could empathize with each other's successes. We could empathize with the direction that each of us were trying to go. But it turns into like, wow, you're awesome. I got so much respect for you. I'm glad I know you. Let's keep talking. And both are good things, right? On NACUL, you have a tendency to go away, forget about the people, and continue on the ideas. MACUL, you have a tendency to forget about the ideas and remember the people.
Brandon?
Cut. One last thought. Do you need an ending piece?
Give us a moment of zen.
You want me to give you a moment of zen?
Does that mean we just sit quietly?
You mean like Jon Stewart?
Like Jon Stewart. Yeah.
I was thinking more,
Or is it the Jerry Seinfeld?
Springer.
Taxi.
I was going to Jerry Springer.
Oh, Jerry Springer's.
Last final thought.
Final thoughts.
Yeah.
Final thoughts.
Can you please do our favorite accent in your final thought?
Do Walken. Yeah.
Walton reflects on...
Walton?
Do John Boy.
Chris.
Walker reflects on MACUL.
Walker, Texas Ranger.
No, don't roundhouse the microphone.
Yeah. Christopher Walken. Final thoughts on MACUL would be, when I'm on one side of MACUL and the Cobo Center, and I gotta go to the other side of MACUL just to get a sandwich. It's hard on my feet. I would like maybe a pair of Keds or Skechers Roundups to shape my bottom. To go up the stairs and around the corner, past the statue of the boxer. It could have been Muhammad Ali. It could have been Will Smith. I don't know. But it's good. I wish I had a wheelchair. I once knew a man who had a wheelchair. His name was Steve. He had a cat. The cat didn't like me.
So final thoughts is, MACUL, I wish I had a wheelchair.
Or a hotel room.
And I wish more cats liked me.
Hey, this is fun, guys. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to MyBlend Stories. For more, visit myblend.org.